Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome back to our second week of fantasy football. I'm here with Ray Jaffe. I'm Jennifer Studer. It's 9 o'clock, and we will be with you until 10 p.m. as we head into the Fantasy Football Fest this weekend. I'm really looking forward to that. How about you, Ray?
Yeah, it's going to be a great time, Jen. A lot going on in Atlantic City, a lot of fantasy experts there, a lot of fantasy football enthusiasts. It'll be a fun weekend. If you're a fantasy buff, it's the place to be coming up this weekend in Atlantic City.
I couldn't say it better myself, and we're going to be live on ESPN Radio on Sunday from 9 to 11, and everyone, all of the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football staff will be there. We're also going to be, selling subscriptions to our website. And speaking of that, now you can actually get the subscription for 50% off. So we're now offering our website subscription until August 31st. You can go to kickassfantasyfootball.com and just subscribe for $9.95. So that's definitely something that everyone should look into. We have the best of the best coverage, talking about breakout players to, who's had the best games, who's had the worst, games of the week, and then all of the experts weigh in as well. So definitely want to check that out.
Yeah, it's a great site, a lot of great content, updated regularly. You get a chance to read some new articles, ongoing updates throughout the year, and I think there's even some giveaways on the site, so go check it out.
So last week we kind of wrapped up the NFC North and the NFC South, except Tampa. So let's kick off the show today with Tampa Bay and who's coming, who's going, who's kind of switched up the roster, and how they're going to change fantasy football this year.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, we've been going through the past couple weeks on our comings and goings, getting people primed up for the season, and we left off with a good team, Tampa, because they have a lot of changes coming up this year. Josh Freeman continues to be the quarterback, but other than that, it's going to be an awful lot of movement. The big addition in Tampa, Jen, is Vincent Jackson, star wide receiver, all-pro wide receiver coming over from the Chargers. Certainly has the potential to put up really big numbers. You can look for to see how he clicks with Josh Freeman. He called Josh Freeman one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, which I think is hyperbole in its greatest form. But, he obviously is pumping up his quarterback, and he could be a really big addition. The other additions are running back Doug Martin. So rookie LeGarrette Blount, who, several people were really high on coming into last year, and he's sort of disappointed. So Blount still has the starter's job for now, see if he can bounce back. But Doug Martin certainly could make some noise as a reserve running back and maybe even steal more carries from Blount as the year goes on.
Well, thank you for your input there, Ray. And let's make a transition over to the West now. In terms of Seattle, I know, we're going to be talking about breakout sophomores later with, Doug Baldwin and stuff. But in terms of people who have kind of stuck around there, are there any players that you think that guys should definitely grab?
Well, what's really interesting in Seattle is they have they will have a new quarterback. It seems to be Matt Flynn, who they paid some money for in this offseason, and so was heralded sort of as the guy coming in. Getting some competition in camp from Russell Wilson, the rookie quarterback out of Wisconsin. I think because they've put the money out for Flynn, he'll be the guy. But Wilson, and we'll talk about rookies that have made an impact in the first week of the preseason later on in the show, and Wilson's one of those. So keep an eye on Wilson to see how he does. But I think Flynn will be the guy, and he certainly has potential coming up through the Packers system, so it'll be his first chance to really turn it loose and see what he can do. The wide receiver side, we talked last week, always in the news, Terrell Owens. He's back in the league on Seattle. So between Braylon Edwards and Terrell Owens, they certainly have if not a lot of fantasy appeal, a lot of media appeal. There'll be plenty of stories coming out of Seattle this year.
And what about the Cardinals? I know in terms of their depth chart, they have Kevin Kolb and John Skelton and Beanie Wells, Brian Williams. But what about talking about grabs there? Are there any players that you think should be at the top of someone's list from there, or even Larry Fitzgerald?
And they did use a high draft pick on Michael Floyd, and there's probably I can think of no better mentor in the league than to have Larry Fitzgerald on the other side, who is one of the very few wide receivers who actually seems like a good guy, and I think will be a great mentor for Michael Floyd. Will be happy to want to see him succeed. So the problem there is going to be getting him the ball. Kevin Kolb has not looked good last year. Certainly did not look good in preseason. Is often hurt, and when he's not hurt, he's relatively ineffective. So they have a quarterback battle going on there. But regardless, either way, they're not going to get a real big arm throwing to them. Lots of talent, Michael Floyd. With Fitzgerald on the other side, he certainly will take away some of the coverage. So he certainly will be open and have the ability to put up some big numbers. The big question will be, can anyone get him the football?
I couldn't agree with you more there. Let's see, who else do we have? We talked about the Seahawks. We talked about Arizona.
Yeah, so when we talk about the other teams, we have two teams that have made some moves. San Francisco certainly has made some interesting moves on the wide receiver side. We just talked about Terrell Owens. The other name that sort of always seems to go with Terrell Owens as far as news-making wide receivers, Randy Moss, with a new home in San Francisco, always dangerous. Always has the potential to even almost single-handedly win a week for you. Also has the potential to disappear and take some weeks off. But he is with the 49ers, along with Mario Manningham and the rookie A.J. Jenkins. So more or less a revamped wide receiver core, along with Michael Crabtree, who's the holdover. From a fantasy perspective, maybe almost too many cooks in the kitchen. Some good options now to spread the ball around to. Not sure any one will stick out. And also just, the way San Francisco plays and with as dominant a defense as they have, in general, I think the passing numbers will be down. Well, they weren't particularly up last year, but San Francisco is not going to turn into a passing team. They're going to play phenomenal defense. They're going to run the ball. They're going to pass the ball when needed. So while they have some talent there, I don't look for potentially huge numbers out of that wide receiving core. And then, of course, finishing up with the Rams, they certainly need a lot of help. They have some potentially. They used a couple second-round draft picks. The rookie running back Isaiah Peed been mediocre so far in camp. He will certainly be a backup to Steven Jackson. He's got some speed. He's got some good wheels, but I don't expect too much from him from a fantasy perspective. The bigger impact player, I think, coming out of St. Louis could be Brian Quick, the wide receiver. Good upside, big body, coming from a double-A school, even some Randy Moss whispers, although Moss is sort of a once in a decade type player. But Brian Quick, with sort of a lack of real good wide receiver options for the Rams, could certainly emerge as a guy that can make his way as, say, a wide receiver 3 type player, maybe a flex type player on fantasy rosters.
What do you think about Steve Smith and Danny Amendola in comparison to Brian Quick?
Well, Amendola is a very different kind of receiver, much more possession type receiver, and that's where I think Quick can make his mark. I think he's more explosive, big play type receiver, and I think that's what the Rams really missed and will look for. I'm hoping and expecting somewhat of a bounce back year from Bradford. So with Bradford sort of getting back in line, he had a really good trajectory after his rookie year, sort of went real flat his sophomore year. I'm hoping to get back on that trajectory with an extra year under his belt. And I think Quick does give him some of the options that their existing receivers don't.
All right. So with that, I think we should talk a little bit about breakout sophomores, because, everyone's always talking about the rookie. Either he enjoys immediate success or he's kind of put on the back burner. But there are some guys that, are definitely going to come out of the woodwork if they haven't already. And I know that we were talking about earlier, Ray, Doug Baldwin, the wide receiver from Seattle.
Yeah, he's an interesting player. He had some very big weeks last year. He had, and this show in particular, we were talking him up for a while, and I think we caught him on a really good week or two. We saw some trending with Baldwin, getting more targets, more looks. That really sort of peaked in the middle of last year. It sort of fell off as the year went on, but absolutely, has some upside. Could take a step forward this year. The big thing with Seattle is new quarterback. Make sure he has that chemistry with, in all likelihood, Matt Flynn, and make sure they can get that connection going. And absolutely, Baldwin, and maybe we'll tease the other guys with a commercial break, but all the guys we're going to go through are absolutely guys to watch and keep your eyes on as we go through the preseason games to get more meaningful weeks 2, weeks 3.
All right, well, with that, Ray, we will definitely take a commercial break, and we will be back with more breakout sophomores. It's Ray Jaffe and Jennifer Studer on the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Radio Show.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Now put your fantasy skills into the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Draft your team and then manage it through a 10-week regular season, a 1-week elimination round, and finally, if you're good enough, a 64-team tournament that will determine the first ever Fantasy Football Evolution champion. The winner of Fantasy Football Evolution receives $25,000, cash prizes paid to the top 16 players. Visit www.nextgenffe.com for more details. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Well, now put your fantasy skills and savvy to the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Fantasy Football Evolution is the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition. The winner gets $25,000. Go to nextgenffe.com to sign up today. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. Fantasy Football Evolution at nextgenffe.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
All right, Jen, it looks like we are back from after some words from our fine sponsors.
Yes, and our sponsors will all be there with us this weekend. Well, at least I know that Fantasy Football Evolution will be. And I know we've talked a lot about them before, but just for any new listeners, Fantasy Football Evolution is the first, actually, fantasy football organization where you can pretty much play with everyone. It's not just a competition of the guys within your league. It's the entire world you're playing against. So if you think that you're pretty much the boss of fantasy football and you haven't really been challenged before, it's definitely an opportunity to see what you're made of and see how good your fantasy football skills are. So go on to kickassfantasyfootball.com. We have a link to their website there, and that's Fantasy Football Evolution.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. We got some great sponsors, and they're sort of continuing to push the envelope on fantasy football. So I think it's to whole new levels.
So back now to our breakout sophomores. Before the break, we talked about Doug Baldwin, the wide receiver from Seattle. But what about the San Diego wide receiver, Vincent Brown?
Jen, I love Vincent Brown this year. I'm very high on him. Vincent Jackson, as we mentioned, is gone, went to Tampa. San Diego is and can be a high-powered offensive team. Vincent Brown was getting more and more looks as the year went on last year. Now, they did bring in Robert Meacham, and Meacham will certainly be in the mix there along with Malcolm Floyd and Eddie Royal as four really pretty strong wide receiver options. But I think Vincent Brown has a lot of upside. Someone's got to get all those catches, yards, and touchdowns that Vincent Jackson used to get. I like the other Vincent. I look for big things from Vincent Brown this year. I like him.
And the former Miami Hurricane, who posted his first 100-yard game in his only second career start before his season ended due to a hip injury, Leonard Hankerson, wide receiver from Washington. So, he's back on from summer camp and could start in 2012. So what do you take on him?
Yeah, I like Hankerson too, and he was really starting to emerge last year. Got sidetracked, of course, with some injuries, but again, the big thing, fantasy-wise, particularly fantasy-wise, you really look for with these teams that have these new quarterbacks is where's their comfort zone? Who are they going to look to? Who are they going to get comfortable with? Robert Griffin III, RG3, of course, taking the helm for the Redskins. We saw him hook up, and I'll talk a little bit more about RG3 as we talk about some of the rookies' strong performances in Week 1. And we saw him hook up with a touchdown pass with Pierre Garçon, the new addition there. So it looks like Garçon and RG3 are going to hit it off merrily right away. I do think Hankerson moves into the mix. Santana Moss, has been there. He's been there for a while. I think his better years are behind him. He's probably more of a possession, 8-10 yard type receiver now. So Garçon certainly, and I think Hankerson might provide more of the boom for the Redskins offense this year.
And continuing on with Washington, the running back Roy Halu, he was Robert Griffin III's best friend this fall, and he'll be effective in terms of the ground game. At least I would think so.
He was RG3's best friend this fall, and they get along great. I think Halu's a good player, and he had a nice season last year. I think a sleeper, though, is Evan Royster, who got more time as the year went on last year. Running back out of Penn State has had some very good games. Looks to me to have even a little bit more potential long term than Halu. So, while I think that'll certainly be between Halu, Royster, Hightower, there's lots of backs in the backfield. I actually like a little bit of an underdog here. I like Evan Royster more to emerge as maybe the more of the feature back for the Redskins this year.
That could definitely be a good point. And about New Orleans, they have a running back, Mark Ingram, and he had definitely some nagging injuries as his rookie. But he's a former Heisman Trophy winner, and he scored in 4 of the last 6 games that he actually played in. Do you think he's going to step up and show us something else this year?
Yeah, Jen, I think you hit it right on the head. He scored in 4 of his last 6 games, and I think he's going to continue to score. The Saints, they have Sproles, they have Pierre Thomas. Sproles, as all our listeners will know, is sort of a scat back, phenomenal out of the backfield, catching passes, great change of pace back, very valuable from a fantasy perspective, particularly in a points per catch league. Pierre Thomas, steady, reliable, a little bit injury prone. I do like Mark Ingram to get more carries this year and continue to get goal line and short yardage type carries. So I do think touchdowns. Mark Ingram will see a lot of touchdowns this year. He'll see the end zone plenty. They still have a very high-powered offense, so the opportunities will be there. So, even in a standard league, I think Ingram absolutely could work as a running back 3 or a flex type back. And in a league that maybe puts a little more emphasis on touchdowns, I might even bump him up to a running back 2.
And to top off the breakout sophomores, LaSure, the running back from Detroit, he ruptured his Achilles tendon last August, actually, and he never really got a chance to show his skills that he posted up back at Illinois. He had, 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns, and, Detroit really could use him. So can they rely on him for this season?
He does have a lot of potential. He also is battling a little bit of a hamstring issue right now, and he is going to be suspended for the first 2 games of the season. And Detroit has, one of these situations where they do sort of have a crowded backfield situation. You have Javid Best, who sort of has been the guy they've wanted to take the mantle from running back situation the last couple of years. Just too many injuries and, frankly, too much subpar performance on the field, and he's still not fully cleared from concussions last year, so Best doesn't look to be a great option. LaSure, I think, is the guy that they would like to turn it over to, but he does have this, hamstring issue to get through. He is going to miss the first couple weeks of the season. I do think he could be a strong play for later in the season, so I'd absolutely keep him on the radar. The other guy to keep on the radar from the Lions is Keelan Williams. A little bit down on the depth chart, but a solid back, good potential back, and on a Lions team that I expect to see a lot of offense from again this year, like last year, with Stafford and Megatron, and I love Titus Young this year. I think whoever runs the ball should have some real opportunities to make some plays, and while LaSure is sort of on the mend and doing his time, keep an eye on Keelan Williams.
Yeah, we should definitely expect big things from Detroit this year, set aside from a fantasy perspective. But with that, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, it's someone's birthday, if you don't already know already, and then we're going to talk about the quarterbacks, the rookie quarterbacks, and how they performed this past week in the preseason games.
This fantasy football season, be sure to check out Power Play Fantasy Sports, featuring free and pay-to-play fantasy football games with huge cash prizes. Power Play Fantasy Sports is your home for the 2012 fantasy football season. Visit the website PowerPlayFantasySports.com and use the promo code KICK to receive 20% off your entry in the Power Player Fantasy Football League, featuring a $5,000 grand prize. Again, that's promo code KICK. If you know football, this is the game for you. Visit PowerPlayFantasySports.com today.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Well, now put your fantasy skills and savvy to the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Fantasy Football Evolution is the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition. The winner gets $25 grand. Go to nextgenffe.com to sign up today. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. Fantasy Football Evolution at nextgenffe.com.
Welcome
okay,
back.
it looks
I'm
like
here
we
with
are
Ray
back.
Gaffey. Yes, Ray, and I'm Jennifer Studer here for Kick-Ass Fantasy Football. we're almost gearing up for the Fantasy Football Fest that's going to be this weekend in Atlantic City. And on Sunday from 9 to 11, we're going to be on ESPN Radio with the whole crew from Kick-Ass Fantasy Football. So definitely stop by. We have some great interviews set up. And you can also now sign up for our early bird special, which you can get all of the articles and commentators and everyone weighing in on our website. From now until August 31st, it's 50% off at kickassfantasyfootball.com, and so it's just $9.95. It's definitely something that you want to look into. Check it out. It also has all of the information about our sponsors and how you can get involved in the Fantasy Football Evolution, which we kind of touched upon before the break, where if you think, you're the best of the best, you can compete literally against anyone in the world who plays fantasy football, and it'll definitely be a good challenge, and it's the first and only one. So click that link on our website.
And, Jen, you will be there.
Yes, I will be there. And will you be there?
I will. I think I will be there on Sunday to join the group for our ESPN gig and help spread the good word of Kick-Ass Fantasy Football. Now, what will you do in Vegas when you're not at the Fantasy Football Fest? I mean, in Atlantic City. Did I say Vegas? Atlantic City.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure. I've never really experienced Atlantic City, so I'd like to just look around. I know the boardwalk's big there. Hopefully it'll be nice and sunny, maybe relax a little bit. But I also just want to take in the scenery. I know Lawrence Taylor's coming, Phil Simms, LaShawn McCoy, Michael Vick. There's going to be lots to see. So bring your whole family. If you play fantasy football, bring your friends, bring the kids, bring your wife. There's plenty to see. There's just going to be so much going on. So I'm really, really excited.
Yeah, even if you're just a football fan, with all the football stars there in action, just come and soak it up.
Now, one guy that I don't think is going to be there, who's celebrating his birthday today and recently graced us, I think it was on the GQ magazine, Tim Tebow. And I know last year you guys were like, oh, it's always Tebow and Tebow Mania and this and that. But we're going to actually just talk about Tebow for a little bit because he isn't the big man on campus anymore. And some people are still, expecting a lot from him. They're expecting him to kind of step away from the quarterback position. Now after the first, preseason games, and then they have, the game against the Giants this weekend, what are you thinking in terms of Tebow? Is, Tebow Mania still going to be what it is? And is he going to, where is he going to be?
Well, as we talk about some of the news out of Week 1, he is, Tim Tebow never seems to be far from the news, and he is in the news again as the Jets are, undergoing a military operation of top secrecy as they roll out their Wildcat packages for Tim Tebow. So, looking for ways to get him on the field in the Wildcat formation. I think from a fantasy perspective, unless they really heavily use the Wildcat, still limited fantasy value for Tebow. Now, that being said, he is not behind Roger Staubach or Tom Brady or Troy Aikman. He's behind Mark Sanchez. So, whether I think it would be unlikely that Sanchez gets benched for Tebow for performance, but not impossible. And there's always the opportunity of injury. So if he does find his way onto the field as more of a starting quarterback again, just because of how much he runs and how much he'll run for touchdowns, he is a viable fantasy play as maybe a very low QB1, certainly a QB2, just for the yards to get with his legs. So we have everywhere you go, even when ghosts control the board, Tim Tebow gets applause.
Yeah.
Someone must be looking down from above on Mr. Tebow.
I'm right there with you, but now that we're kind of seeing how things are taking shape and the first preseason Week 1 is behind us, the rookie performances, a lot of people weren't really expecting Luck to a lot of people were either for him or against him, but he really stepped up. At least in my opinion, I think he kind of proved himself. What about you?
I mean, for a half of a game, he looked fantastic. I think everyone agrees that Andrew Luck is sort of a can't-miss long-term prospect. I think the views on Luck are whether out of the gates, just because the Colts are not a particularly good football team, don't have particularly great skill position players, might he struggle? Maybe might an RG3 actually outscore him just because points and yards he can get with his legs. But, boy, certainly Luck looked all the part in week 1, 188 yards, passing 2 touchdowns. And this was with the first team against first-team defenses, at least for a quarter. So it wasn't like some of the other quarterbacks that we will talk about that piled up some of their stats against second and third-team defenses. He, first game, don't read too much into it, but he certainly started off on the right foot.
Exactly, which is why I think that he proved himself. But in comparison with RG3, he had a touchdown drive, he had a key drop. How do you think, what was his overall performance? Do you think it's going to remain consistent in the weeks to follow?
Yeah, I think RG3 is a legitimately good player. I do think he will be a solid fantasy player because, like I said, because you really have to, especially for quarterbacks, for those of us that have been doing fantasy football for a long time, the value of running quarterbacks. If you go way back, your Randall Cunninghams, your Donovan McNabbs, your Michael Vicks, now your Tim Tebow's. It's, a quarterback that's going to get you 50 yards rushing. In a lot of leagues, that's equal to 150 yards passing. It turns their 200-yard passing day into a 350-yard passing day. And RG3 can do some of that for you. So, yeah, he had a solid debut, only on the field for 3 drives. But, again, going against better competition. Led the team down for 1 touchdown. He did have a drop, which should have converted a touchdown and kept not a touchdown, but it should have converted a first down and kept his team on the field for a while longer. So, yeah, both really the 2 big prizes of the draft, Luck and RG3, have had good camps, and for what it's worth, game 1 they haven't disappointed their fans yet. I think the board must like RG3 more than Tebow based on that applause.
It was a little bit longer, wasn't it?
It was a little more robust, exactly.
Now, Russell Wilson, we kind of touched on him earlier. He, 12 for 16. People expected him to be smart and consistent. Can you agree with that statement? Do you think that's what he did? And how do you think he's going to perform, moving forward with 1 game under his belt?
Wilson, he's interesting because he's small for a quarterback, and that was the big knock against him. If he was, out of Wisconsin, he was tremendously successful, really an offensive juggernaut by himself. And, if he was 4 inches taller, he probably would have been a top 10 draft pick, maybe higher. So he's got the talent. It's one of these NFL things where they're worried about the height for the quarterback position. All the guy's ever done is perform and perform well. He did have a very good game. Now his was more against second team and third team defenses since Flynn got the start. But really good game. And again, 124 yards passing, but also ran for 59 yards. So there's that double threat. As we talked about earlier, Jen, I think because of the dollars out in the contract, Flynn will be given every opportunity to start. And I don't think he's done anything to not deserve that at this point. But I think Russell Wilson is going to continue to apply some pressure to Mr. Flynn.
So now we have his height only at 5'11", but then you go to Nick Foley, 6'5". Big difference there, but he scored. He had 2 touchdowns. So for Arizona, what do you think he's gonna do?
Well, so Foles actually came in late in the game, and so he was going against weaker defenses. But it is, he's in an interesting spot because he's behind Mike Vick and he's behind Kafka. Now Kafka's hurt, so now he's behind Vick, and we know how much Vick gets hurt. And Vick already got a little tweaked in the first game, although he's fine. So while Foles is a little later pick, third-round draft pick, he's sort of in a situation where he may, by default, wind up finding himself on the field. So he's certainly a guy to watch. Did have a very nice second half of that first game. It's actually where the Eagles did all their scoring. 144 yards, 2 touchdowns, like you said, Jen. One of those was clearly on a busted play, but overall, solid performance. And because of who's in front of him, you can't ignore the fact he might get his chance. Now, doesn't mean he'll necessarily be successful when he gets his chance, but I think he certainly could see the field this year.
And then an interesting guy, Ryan Tannehill, of Miami at Texas A&M. First 2 years he was a receiver and then went to quarterback. Do you think that's going to help him, number one? And number two, what do you see him moving forward?
Well, yeah, Tannehill was a top 10 pick, so they certainly liked him. And he did have a very strong first game. And, David Garrard is there, hurt, so it was more the Matt Moore, Ryan Tannehill show. And Tannehill, he played well. He did play well. Miami, I think, would love for him to really take the reins and be the starter. I think the idea would be to maybe, study under David Garrard for a year. But, you question how much will Tannehill really learn from Garrard? It's not like you're studying under the tutelage of, like I say, Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or someone like that. I mean, he'll learn some, but if he's ready to play, if Miami is not in the mix from a playoff perspective, I think second half of the year certainly could be Tannehill time. Based on their season last year, they came on a little stronger at the end and played better, but don't expect them to be a playoff team. So, by week 8, 9, we might see Tannehill take over the reins there.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Darth disagrees.
And then
Too
Kendall
funny.
Wright.
Just one guy I wanted to bring up, sort of off the quarterback trail, is Kendall Wright. So some news out of the Titans camp. Jake Locker this week will be, this coming week 2, will be the starting quarterback. I guess they haven't officially anointed him the starter going into the regular season over Hasselbeck, but signs are pointing that way. And Locker and Wright had a very nice connection the first week. Wright caught 3 balls for 47 yards. He's been really good in camp. He'll certainly have some opportunities to play. And, we talk a lot about looking for these connections and where, rookie or young, Locker certainly is a young quarterback, find their comfort zones. And, it could be that Wright's going to find Wright will be his comfort zone. Kenny Britt, obviously is the number 1 receiver in Tennessee, but he has some injury problems, and he's always sort of a little bit suspect with his behavior on and off the field. So you don't know how that's going to play out, and it's sort of like wide open for Kendall Wright to really shine, and it looks like he's going to be given the opportunity.
Hey guys, this is the commish. I just wanted to say, step in real quick because I heard you talking about Kendall Wright, one of the guys that I happen to love this season coming up. How's everyone doing tonight?
The commission loves Kendall Wright so much. You've called in just to sing the praises of. You know what, Commish? Knowing that me and you were on the same page, is terrifying.
It really is. It really is. Because we are usually not on the same page. But I think with all this craziness with Kenny Britt, you know what? I think they're going to end up letting this guy go at some point. I mean, they're turning the page quick. I think they've already moved on. I think you're going to see Kendall Wright being the starter, and I'm loving that Jake Lockard is getting the nod this week because they already seem to have a really nice chemistry going. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think these two are going to put up some big numbers in the future. Great guy to have, especially keeper leagues, dynasty leagues, those kind of things.
Yeah, it's huge, and as we talk about a lot on this show, and I know you and the professor doing your show as well, is you go through preseason and you sort of like you're waiting for the season to start. But as a fantasy player and doing this for a long time, there are the things you look for. Lock or right, are they connecting in the preseason? Well, you know what? It's going to roll over into the regular season. So if you see a couple more games where Wright's getting 5, 6, 7 targets, catching 3, 4, 5, 6 balls, you take a flyer on him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's a guy you can pick up late in the draft and end up having a really decent, possibly top 10, definitely at least top 15 production out of this guy. So I'm loving him.
And Kamish, you're going to be there with us at the Fantasy Football Fest on Sunday. We were just talking about how much we're looking forward to that.
I'm so excited. I mean, this Fantasy Football Fest, first ever of its kind in Atlantic City. We expect about 30,000 people out. So for any of our listeners, please come join us. We're going to have a booth. I believe we're in booth 422, right across from the bar. So we'd love to share a nice frosty beverage with you.
So you might even get to see the commish once or twice since it was across from the bar.
Absolutely. We'll be, matter of fact, starting to, I don't know if you talked about it already, Jen, but starting actually right now, we can start offering our listeners our Fantasy Fest show special. We're offering our website half price till August 31st. It's regularly $19.95 to subscribe. You can now subscribe less than $10, just $9.95 for the entire season. And with that, you get our projections, expert advice. You get our trade analyzer. We have the #1 rated draft tool on the internet. So you want to definitely come check that out. You can put your scoring system in, your league rules, get customized cheat sheets right at kickassfantasyfootball.com. It's one of the best values on the net for just less than $10. And oh yeah, we're giving away a cruise to everybody who subscribes, a free cruise for 2 to the Bahamas. So you cannot beat the value at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Well, who would have won a cruise?
Phenomenal, Commissioner. What will you be doing in Atlantic City when the show's not going on?
We're going to be selling subscriptions. We're going to be giving out expert advice, helping people along with getting ready for their drafts, just like we do on these shows here, right? We're going to be, matter of fact, we have a really cool thing set up with Fantasy Judgment. Mike Stein of Fantasy Football Judgment. We're going to be actually doing and Ray, I actually want you to participate in this with your background. He settles fantasy disputes. He's going to be coming in full judge garb, and we're actually going to be filming this for the website, our website and his website, and we're going to be settling a real dispute, a real fantasy dispute. And he writes a Supreme Court justice answer to settle all disputes in all leagues, and the guy does phenomenal work. And as a matter of fact, Mike Stein agreed to give our listeners, our subscribers, anybody who subscribes to our website, along with all the great draft tools and projections and expert advice you get, he's going to give everyone a free Fantasy Judgment, which is a $15 value if you just get it straight on his site. So I think everyone should come out to the Fantasy Fest. You'll get to meet Mike Stein. You'll get to meet me, the commissioner. Well, the professor is going to be with us. Fantasy Insider Matt Lowry, of course. Jen Studer, our expert host here on the Blog Talk radio shows, along with the judge, Ray Jaffe. So it's going to be a great time for everybody. I'm really looking forward to it.
With all due respect to me and all our fancy experts, I think they really want to come to meet Jen.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Well,
no pressure,
you know
Jen.
What? Yeah, don't make me more nervous than I already will be. But you know what? It's going to be a lot of fun, and just because it's the first ever, I think that just makes it that much better, because you don't really know what to expect, and everyone wants to see it because it's the first ever, and it's in a great location. And like I was saying earlier, just bring your wife, bring your kids, bring your friends, because it's great location, and who wouldn't want to meet the professional athletes that are going to be there, like Michael Vick and LaShawn McCoy, and even like Lawrence Taylor and Phil Simms and Joe Montana. Like, just such huge names are going to be here. So just overall, it would just be a great experience.
Yeah, I mean, not only with the great athletes and former athletes that are going to be there, like you mentioned, Jen, they're also going to have the NFL experience is going to be there. So they're going to have passing accuracy, kicking accuracy. They're going to have an interactive gaming section where they have little tournaments. I believe it's probably like the All Madden kind of tournaments. You can actually bring your fantasy league there and do a draft. Right there at the Fantasy Football Fest. They're going to have all kinds of great panels that all these former NFL players are going to be giving, talking to everyone about, different sections of football, about the quarterbacks, about running backs, about wide receivers, why, when to draft them. I mean, it's just awesome advice, and you can only get it at one place this Saturday and Sunday, Fantasy Football Fest in Atlantic City. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great time.
Well, I think that we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we get back, we're going to talk about preseason Week 1 injuries. So, Kamish, feel free to stay on and chat with us about that. Ryan Matthews, his collarbone, do you think he's really going to be back for the first week? He says it, but I think it's pretty unlikely. So that and more when we come back.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com. Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Now put your fantasy skills into the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Draft your team and then manage it through a 10-week regular season, a 1-week elimination round, and finally, if you're good enough, a 64-team tournament that will determine the first ever Fantasy Football Evolution champion. The winner of Fantasy Football Evolution receives $25,000, cash prizes paid to the top 16 players. Visit www.nextgenffe.com for more details. The only way to know if you're the best is to play.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95, and we'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
This fantasy football season, be sure to check out Power Play Fantasy Sports, featuring free and pay-to-play fantasy football games with huge cash prizes. Power Play Fantasy Sports is your home for the 2012 fantasy football season. Visit the website PowerPlayFantasySports.com and use the promo code KICK to receive 20% off your entry in the Power Player Fantasy Football League, featuring a $5,000 grand prize. Again, that's promo code KICK. If you know football, this is the game for you. Visit PowerPlayFantasySports.com today.
Welcome back to Kick-Ass Fantasy Football. Jennifer Studer, your host, with Judge Ray Jaffe, and the commish is on with us this evening. He joined in. We're talking about preseason Week 1 injuries. And Ray Matthews' collarbone. What's going on with that?
Well, Ryan Matthews, unfortunately it's a case of, I think it's going to be an ongoing saga with Ryan Matthews. The guy's got tons of talent. We love him. When he's on the field, we love him. He's a wonderful back, versatile, catch the ball, run the ball, but he's always fighting the injury bug. Did break his collarbone. He thinks he'll be back for Week 1. His coach and I think every doctor you would talk to don't think he'll be back for Week 1. The general consensus is 6 weeks for this type of injury is more likely than 4 weeks. So, maybe Week 2, optimistically, probably Week 3 more safely at 100% for Ryan Matthews would be my guess.
Yeah, right. I'm right on there with you. I mean, they're talking about 6 weeks till you can even put on pads, shoulder pads I'm talking about. And this injury is a kind of injury that could be re-injured rather easily, I'm told, by talking to some doctors about this specific injury. So I'm real concerned about it. But I'll tell you one thing it does do. I mean, everybody had this guy targeted, as a top 10 back, probably maybe 5th or even 6th. overall pick. So I'm thinking that, you know what, he's still going to be a guy that is going to do some damage when he finally does get on the field. I'm personally not. I'm thinking week 4. That's where I'm setting my expectation level at. And I think when he does get back on, he will do some damage because he is a talented back, and that's going to drop his value big time in draft. So guess what? If he's going to be there a little bit later in the rounds, and I'm talking after the 5th round, I'm inclined to take him. Now, I don't know that it'll last that long, depending on who you're drafting with, but I think that it could end up turning him into a value if you could find a way to stash him on the bench until he finally does come back.
You know, it's a great point, Commish, because the reality is if you're taking Ryan Matthews, you sort of need to put in the bank you're going to miss 2 or 3 weeks somewhere along the line. So if you just put it in the bank, you're going to miss the first 2 or 3 weeks, and you get lucky and he's good to go for 12, 13 weeks rest of the season through the playoffs, through the fantasy playoffs, you've gotten a steal then.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think you got to look at that guy that way anyway, based on his short history with the league, you know, his first 2 seasons.
And also questionable for week 1 in terms of a knee injury, Trent Richardson. Do you think that he's going to be back by week 1? I mean, they all, I guess, hope to be back, but is that realistic?
Yeah, I think for Richardson, he should be back. I think they're probably being, very cautious with him because he is, the prize jewel of the Cleveland Brown franchise right now. And a lot of people are high on Richardson. I have to be one of them that's also high on Richardson. Trying to temper your enthusiasm with rookies, but I think Cleveland they sort of have the ingredients to have a back come in and have a really, really big year. Hillis did it, and I think Hillis is frankly, of moderate talent 2 years ago. So behind that line, which is really a dominating left side of their offensive line, I think Richardson should be good to go, will be good to go. And, the people that are putting him in the top 10, top 8 running backs, I think I have him in that range.
Yeah, you know what, Ray? I agree with you wholeheartedly. Again, I can't believe it must be going to snow outside sometime soon.
Snow in August.
The thing is, even though it was, technically arthroscopic knee surgery, they actually compared it to sort of having a hangnail removed, and this is very minor. It was just a little bit of cleanup documents when he did the full surgery earlier in the year with him, and I expect him to be back week 1. And guess what? He's the guy who's going to run the rock, and these are the things you're looking for because they're very few and far between now. You got all these running back by committees in the NFL now, so here's a guy you definitely want to target, and there's a guy I would probably be looking at in the 2nd round, as a matter of fact, to pick up.
Now, Adrian Peterson and Hakeem Nicks, they're back. Would you guys expect them to be back already? And where do you think, what's the possibility of them getting injured again or, re-injuring themselves?
Well, they are back, and it's certainly good news for both the Vikings and Giants franchises, both, very dominating players. Should be good to go. That's the word, we think, as we get into the regular season here. As far as re-injuring themselves, Adrian Peterson had a lot of injury problems in college, coming out of college. I would say, for a running back, he's been up and down a little bit with the injuries. He's been, it's crazy to say because he has missed time, but for a running back, he's been reasonably healthy. I expect him to be fine to start the season. I have some other concerns about Peterson, just around him. At some point, I feel like he's one of these backs. It seems to happen. I don't know if this is the year or next year's going to be the year, and maybe it'll be another 2 or 3 years for Peterson. But you have the Priest Holmes, Sean Alexander, Jamal Lewis disease, where all of a sudden these backs, it happened to Tomlinson to some extent. They just go south on you. So I still think you get another good year out of Peterson. And Nicks is back. I think he'll be. I loved Eli last year. I think his stock has continued to go up, so I don't think he's quite as a Manning's never an unknown commodity, but an unrespected commodity as far as his value as a fantasy quarterback. But obviously Victor Cruz has really made the big strides there. So Nix will be back, but I wouldn't expect much different than he did last year with Cruz taking such a big role.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Peterson goes, you're coming off ACL, MCL surgery. I'm staying away from him. I'm a little nervous. I think there is some good left in him. I think it's next year. I don't have faith in these kind of gambles when I'm playing fantasy football. I like more of that sure thing, and watching other players having these type of injuries. It's a year till you really come back to your former self. Now, is an 80% Peterson better than 100%? I don't know, DeMarco Murray. Maybe, but I'm not willing to take that kind of gamble. Hakeem Nicks, you know what? He's had a little bit more time to recover. It was a foot injury. It wasn't the knee. So, I feel a little bit better with him. But you know what? Victor Cruz really is the guy shining over there in New York, and that's the guy more I'm likely to target over anywhere close to a Hakeem Nicks.
What about Miles Austin? He had a hamstring injury, but, the reports are saying that he's going to be fine. Do you think he's a go?
Yeah, he should be fine. I mean, a couple guys got nicked up, in week 1 of preseason, so, we just want to watch Miles Austin, like you said, Jen, the law firm of Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis comes to mind, BGE, a little nicked up, probably will sit this coming week. And another guy that's nicked up, and we didn't hit it at the top of the show, but it's probably worth talking about. James Starks is a little nicked up, but the bigger bruise to James Starks might be into his ego, because the Packers have brought in Cedric Benson to, I would say effectively, if not split carries with Starks, more take over that lead role, and because he's in that Green Bay offense. Cedric Benson, if he does take over that lead role, he's going to be a productive back. There's too many scoring opportunities there not to be.
I love this move for the Packers. I think Benson will be a beast. I think it's a guy you could pick up in the 5th, maybe 6th round of your draft. I've done a few mocks the last few nights, and that's where I've been getting him, and I think he's going to be tremendous value. This guy's easily a 1,000-yard runner and quite possibly a 9 to 10 touchdown running back, even on the Green Bay Packers, who loves to pass the ball everywhere.
Yeah, they just have. There's just so many chances there. It's the kind of thing where by default, if you're the lead back, you're going to get chances in Green Bay. There's too many of them to go around.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I guess this is our 3rd show already, and it's already over. It goes by so fast, and I feel like we can't even, all of the information that we want to share with everyone, we can't even put into one show. We would be going till midnight.
Yeah,
just think what happens when the season starts. That's why we have kick-ass fantasy football day after day after day. It's ongoing.
That's right. We have
and that's
4
why
great
people need to.
Here.
And that's why people need to subscribe to the website, because everything that we can't say here, we can share with you daily, 24/7 on kickassfantasyfootball.com. So, next time I talk to you guys, at least on the radio, is going to be on Sunday.
We will
That's
be
right.
in AC with wallets full of money from our winnings and plenty of money to spread around on fantasy football drafts.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Actually, what we should do, and sort of have like a winner's zone at the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football booth. So, anyone that comes straight from the tables into the convention center, what a better way to spend your $10 that you just won, took from the casinos, hand it over and get your full share of fantasy knowledge for the year.
That's it. Just come see us. We'll be booth 422 across from the bar. We'll share a frosty beverage and some fantasy football.
Sounds like a plan. And for those of you who, for whatever reason, you can't make it to Atlantic City, listen to us on ESPN Radio from 9 to 11, 2-hour special on Sunday. And we look forward to talking with all of you in Atlantic City. So the commish, thanks for joining us tonight. Judge Ray Jaffe, thank you for all of your expert advice. And I'm Jennifer Studer. Thank you again.